Oh, hello, I'm hoping you can hear me. Can you let me know in the chat, please? Okay, thank you, Derek. How are y'all doing? Hi, Paul. Long time no see. See if I can hear. Okay, phones are working. Okay, so we'll get started about 3 minutes or so. I think we got a little late start on opening up the room, so we'll give people some time to come in.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to get started with today's EF session. I would like to introduce our speaker, Jason Abellada, and his professional career basically spans the areas of industrial control system engineering, information technology, and parliamentary law. And today he's going to give an engineering future session on the intro to Robert's Rules of Order. Please enjoy.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully you can still hear me. My name is Jason Abellada. And I'm glad that you all are here to learn about Robert's Rules of Order. And so what I plan to do is try to go through most of the slides fairly quickly so we could focus on the practice exercise and Q&A. But, at any time, just feel free to leave questions in the chat and we'll definitely address them. Okay, so first what I'd like to do, is we have a fairly small group here, but go ahead and put in the chat two things. First, in one message, where you're located. And after that, what's your experience level with Robert's Rules of Order, according to the list on the screen here. So 1 through 4. So location and then a number. And put that in there just so I can get a feel for the audience here this evening. Robert who? Okay, there we go. Okay, give it another few more seconds. Yeah, thank you. So we've got, yeah, New York, Alabama, a couple Floridas. I'm from Florida myself, on the West Coast, Central, near Tampa. Okay, so lots of 3s and 4s. We're good from all over the place. Great. Okay, so yes, so for just about everyone here will be an introduction. And I'm assuming that most of you will be attending conventions, so this will be very useful for you all, just to get a feel for the procedures that you'll see while you're there. And then in the future, if you're in other types of meetings where Robert's Rules of Order is implemented, that you'll have some knowledge on how to navigate through those meetings. Okay, great. I'm glad you all are here, taking the time during your evening. Okay, so what I'd like for you to learn, my goal following this meeting, is that you have a meeting like this where everything is proper and organized on the left-hand side, lots of collaboration and free and fair discussions, an efficient meeting. And what not the meeting on the right where Robert's Rules of Order is not used properly and chaos ensues. Okay. Now, in the world of parliamentary law, there are different types of manuals, which we call parliamentary authorities. And so we're going to focus on Robert's Rules of Order. It's the most commonly used manual for parliamentary procedure. And most of them have some similarities, but there are some differences in the procedures depending on the manual used. But we'll focus on Robert's Rules of Order. Now, here are some of the benefits of Robert's Rules of Order. It provides the framework for fair, democratic, and efficient meetings. And we use these rules to accomplish the work of Tau Beta Pi on the convention floor. And if you're attending convention, you'll be appointed to committee. So in those committee meetings, these procedures will be very useful to you. And Robert's Rules also offer guidelines for self-governance of organizations. And we'll talk about that briefly. And so the rules of order apply to what we call deliberative assemblies. I'll talk about what those are. Robert's Rules of Order provides a systematic approach to meeting organization and operation, conducting business in an efficient manner, optimized with problem-solving tools. Now, you may or may not be familiar with another profession that may have some similarities in that there may be systems in place that strive for efficiency and optimization, and tools are available. So if you come up with any, let me know in the chat if you can think of anything like that. Okay, so also it's kind of just keep in the back of your head, we're gonna talk about an example study problem where a collegiate chapter wants to increase Tau Beta Pi awareness on campus. And really what I like about Robert's Rules of Order, and I attended my first convention in 2015. And right after I attended that and I saw the business meetings and how smoothly everything went, I decided right after that I wanted to learn more about it and become a parliamentarian. So it's going to be a great experience for those of you that are attending convention to see these procedures in action. And I do really like the problem-solving aspect, so we will talk about that for sure. Robert's Rules of Order focuses on protecting the rights of the following. So the majority, the minority in a meeting, then individual members have rights. Members who aren't in attendance, so the absentees have rights, and then all of the above. So Robert's Rules and its framework keeps all of these things in mind. Okay, so here are the fundamental rights of all members. So all members have the right to attend meetings, make motions, debate, and vote. And then if there is a reason that we want to restrict or remove these rights, there are special procedures in place that are required. But fundamentally, these rights are protected. Okay, so why do we use Tau Beta Pi as Tau Beta Pi? Why do we use Robert's rules? Well, the main reason we use it is because it's defined in the Constitution and bylaws under Article 14, Section 7, where it defines the parliamentary authority as Robert's Rules of Order newly revised governing the association. Okay. And if you've looked, I don't know how many of you have actually looked at your chapter bylaws, but you may have a section that talks about meetings and how Robert's Rules of Order shall be the parliamentary authority or parliamentary guide. Now, just based on the responses, maybe you didn't know what that means, but after this evening session, you will have a basic understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. So under parliamentary law, we have a hierarchy of rules. At the very top are federal and state laws in the United States. Then below that, we have the Articles of Incorporation, which defines the Tau Beta Pi Association Incorporated. In the laws in Tennessee, there's a legal document filed there that defines the organization and some aspects of it. And then the core of what we're looking at in the association, how it runs and what's unique to Tau Beta Pi are the Constitution and bylaws below that. And then we have special rules of order, and then the rules of order, which is Robert's Rules of Order. So Robert's Rules is fairly low on the list. There are some unique rules that Tau Beta Pi has that trump Robert's Rules of Order. Now at convention, you'll see some special rules and standing rules that get adopted that are unique to that convention as well. Okay. Okay, so who is Robert? Actually, Robert's Rules of Order was authored by General Henry M. Robert, and he was an engineering officer in the Army in 1863 during the Civil War, where he was asked to preside over a meeting in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to discuss defense of the city in the event of Confederate attack. So that meeting actually lasted 14 hours, and Mr. Robert had no idea what he was doing. So ever since that meeting, following that meeting, he decided to do a lot of research on how meetings had been previously run and were there other manuals for parliamentary procedure in publication. And so he took what his research brought him, and he authored the first edition in 1876. It's gone through several revisions. 1970 was when Robert's Rules of Order became Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, or RONR. And we're currently on the 12th edition, which was in 2020. So now on the left is the main manual that parliamentarians use. It's about 700 or so pages. But I would recommend, if you want to learn more about this, you can get the Robert's Rules of Order in brief. It's around $7 or $8. You can adopt a motion to purchase that for your chapter if you don't already have it. And you can kind of read that in about 60 to 90 minutes to get 80% of what you would need to run a meeting under Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, so I'll talk about the 5 types of deliberative assembly real quick. The primary one is local assembly of an organized society. So that's your local collegiate chapter or alumni chapter of Tau Beta Pi. That would be an example of that. We'll talk about, convention, which is an deliberative assembly of delegates. So every chapter has a voting delegate that is appointed to represent that chapter at convention. Then we have a board. That's a type of deliberative assembly. So in the case of Tau Beta Pi, it's the Executive Council. Legislative bodies, maybe you've seen C-SPAN on TV. So House of Representatives and the Senate follow Robert's Rules of Order. They have their special rules. They're a type of deliberative assembly as a legislative body. And then a mass meeting would be a public meeting out in the street. You want to accomplish some business. You don't see those very often, but sometimes they use Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, so can go back to convention. So the Constitution and bylaws define the convention as the main governing body of the Tabula Pi. And so during the convention, there will be business meetings where the convention delegates will deliberate and vote on matters that affect the entire association. Okay, let's go on. So there's a lot of business to cover in a short amount of time during convention. So you'll be appointed to committees. These are appointed to accomplish specific tasks that require detailed investigation and discussion. So all of these committee meetings can be going on at the same time because there's a lot of business to cover. It would be virtually impossible to complete all of that on the convention floor alone. So these committees are very important. And so during the business meetings, the committee chairs will report their committee business, and then they'll bring business to the floor as needed for final action as decided by all of the convention delegates. Okay, so to have a meeting, there's mention of a quorum. There's a minimum number of members that have to be in attendance to attend, to actually have the meeting and accomplish anything. So that's what a quorum is. And then in addition to the quorum, you require 2 officers present at the meeting. You'll see them at convention. So the chair is the presiding officer that serves in an impartial facilitator for the meeting that starts and ends the meeting, follows the agenda and makes rulings and takes the votes. And then you have a secretary that keeps an official record of what was accomplished. So those are called the minutes. Here's a sample agenda of, at least this is a draft agenda. Now it could change before or during convention, but this is kind of just a basic framework for what to expect. And you'll have a copy of this presentation. I'll send it to the appropriate person that would distribute it to everyone here. Okay, so there's several business meetings and lots of reports and actions if necessary. So it's required that the chair follows this agenda. And so if there's deviations, there's a procedure for deviating from the agenda. Okay. Also at convention, you'll have elections for executive council. Those procedures will be described at the convention. And you may also see some constitution and bylaws amendments proposed during convention. And so I've just put some slides on the procedure required to actually install those amendments, if they're passed, into the official record, to the official constitution and bylaws of Tabula Pi. So I'll just go ahead and skip through these. Constitution has a procedure for amending it, and the bylaws have their own section for amending. Although they're one document, there are some differences. The Constitution tends to be more difficult to change. Bylaws can have a little bit more flexibility in changing them. Okay, are there any questions so far on that? So those are the basic sort of high-level terms that you may see in Robert's Rules of Order without actually going into the procedures. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. Let me check something real quick here before I move on. Okay. Okay, so there's a 6-step program for processing motions. And so a motion is how business is brought before the convention. And so any delegate at the convention can move a motion, and it's essentially what a motion is a formal proposal to take certain action. Multiple motions could be made during this process, but we always deal with one motion at a time. And so to make a motion, a delegate must first have the floor, which means that the delegate has been recognized by the presiding officer to have the right to speak to the convention or to the meeting. And so you'll see that there will be microphones placed throughout the convention meeting room. So you'll stand in front of one of those to seek recognition. And so if there is a motion, you would start your motion by saying, I move to, or I move that. That is the preferred wording. Now you could also say, I make a motion to, or I motion to, followed by what you want to do. That's less correct, but in a more informal meeting, that is perfectly acceptable. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is to second the motion. So at convention, the chair will ask if there's a second. And so at convention, what you'll do is you'll shout your chapter and then second. So in my case, if I was the delegate at a Florida Alpha or Tampa Bay alumni chapter, I would say Florida Alpha seconds. I would shout that out loud, and you don't have to be recognized by the chair to do that. You'll just shout it out. And then you'll see at convention, a lot of chapters will shout that out as a second, and they'll get their chapter in the minutes as seconding that motion. Okay, so that's step two. Step three is once the motion has been made and seconded, the chair will state that motion, that it's been moved and seconded to do blah, blah, blah. And then at that point, that motion now belongs to the convention for deliberation and processing and voting. Okay, so step four then is to debate. So the chair will open it up for debate. And we want to follow these rules for debate. So make sure that there's a motion on the floor pending. In most cases, you'll require to be recognized first, and the chair will acknowledge you as the delegate of a chapter. Then if you made the motion as the maker, you would get first preference to debate, to where you would debate the pros of why you made that motion, why you proposed it. And you'll see it back and forth on, some people will be in favor, some will be against. But you'll want to first say, oh, I'm in favor of the motion because, and give your reasoning for it. And that will allow the delegates to make a proper decision. So they'll hear all the different sides, and that'll allow them to make their decision if they're in favor or against. Okay. So at convention, I think there'll be a standing rule that says that the speaker can only speak once, but under the default rules of Robert's Rules of Order, each member gets 2 speeches per day. But I think at convention, there'll be 1. Just depends on how the standing rules are defined for this year's convention. Okay. So when I say avoid personalities, I mean, it's strongly recommended that we don't insult each other. We tend to, how would I describe this? We would speak only to the merits of a member's arguments without attacking the member directly. So the safest way to do that is to actually address the chair. So I don't know if you've seen a meeting in practice, but somebody speaking, for example, a member of the House of Representatives would say, Madam Speaker, blah, blah, blah. So they're actually speaking to the entire assembly, but they're doing it through the chair as if they're speaking to the chair directly. Okay. And then at this time during debate, this is when secondary motions are in order. And we'll kind of briefly talk about what secondary motions are. Now, after the debate, they'll go back and forth. Once the debate is over, the chair will take the vote. And so then the chair will put that motion to the floor for vote. And so if it's a voice vote, which is a majority vote, which is how most motions are adopted, the chair will say those in favor of the motion say aye, and everybody would say aye in favor. Then the chair will always take the vote in opposition by saying those opposed to the motion say no. Okay, so once that vote is taken by voice, sometimes actually a voice vote is not sufficient. It may be necessary because the vote is close, or there's a vote that requires something different than a majority, which is more than half. So you might require a 2/3 or 3/4. We'll take a visual vote, which will be an electronic vote or a vote by show of hands. So that's another method of the vote. And then there are other things that we could do, a secret ballot or something like that. Okay. So then after the vote's taken, the chair will announce who has the vote or who won. And then if the motion failed or passed. Okay, so those are the 6 steps. Okay. Now, secondary motion. So what I talked about was a main motion, which is the core item of business that's brought to the meeting. But and that's the lowest ranking, but there are other types of motions that you can make, and I'll provide some handouts. We can talk about those if the question comes up, but I'll give you handouts to look over prior to the convention. And my contact information will be in this presentation. If you have any questions about that, you can email me or give me a call. But secondary motions are made when the motion is pending. There's a main motion pending. And some secondary motions have a high rank and others aren't ranked. But you don't have to worry about that. The parliamentarian and the presiding officer will guide the meeting, and we'll let the convention know what if a motion is in order or out of order. So by out of order, we're not in a courtroom. So we're not calling members out of order for being inappropriate in their conduct. We're saying they're out of order. The motion is out of order because it's not correctly aligned with how Robert's Rules outlines that procedure. Okay, so you'll hear something's in order or out of order. That's what that means. Okay, and so when a secondary motion is made, if it's in order, we will generally allow that motion to be processed immediately as it has the preference. Okay, and let's go over that handout just briefly. Let me pull it up here. There are a couple of handouts I will give you. See if I can find it here. Can you see that? Let me know if you cannot see this document here. It says Robert's Rules of Order handout. Okay. Okay, you can see it. Okay, so there's a question. What's the relationship between main and secondary motion? So a main motion is the first motion. Let's say there's no business on the floor and somebody wants to introduce an action that the member wants to have decided on by vote. So that's introduced primarily as a main motion. Now, once that main motion has been debated, there are different types of secondary motions that you can make. And I'll go over a couple of examples of that. So this handout kind of just goes over what we talked about, the fundamental rules of Robert's Rules and the rights, and the basics of parliamentary procedure and a main motion and debate and voting. But then there are secondary motions. So the main one that you'll probably come across for sure is this motion to amend. So if you don't like the wording of the motion as it's presented, you can actually propose a wording by striking out or changing words. So that an amendment would be an example of a secondary motion that's applied to the main motion. Okay. Now there are things that aren't actually directly related to the main motion, but that you can make. And they're examples here. So as you get this document, if you have any questions, definitely let me know. Okay. Then the other handout kind of just talks about the characteristics of motions. We won't really go over all of these aspects in the time that we have, but if you have time to read this document, I would recommend going through this. So it talks about if the motion's in order and when. Can you interrupt a speaker? Is the second required? Is it debatable? Can you amend it? And then what vote is needed and that sort of thing. So this page talks about the ranks of motions. So the motion on top has higher ranking than the main motion, which is on the bottom. So there's a ranking system for these motions. And then there are miscellaneous motions that may or may not take preference over a different motion. Okay. So Robert's Rules of Order has 98 motions. You won't have to know 98. You only have to know maybe 5 or 6 of them. At most, maybe 10. But as you're kind of sitting through the meeting, some may be more familiar with the rules, so they'll be more comfortable with the motions and they'll be making them. So then you can follow their lead and use those motions as they come about to solve the problem that we're trying to solve here. Okay, so those are the handouts. Okay, so now we have time for the rest of this meeting. We'll go back to our study problem. And since we have a smaller group, I would kind of encourage some participation. And I'll help you in the process if you have questions on how to do things. But feel free if you have your audio set up to if you want to be recognized, you can raise your hand or just unmute your mic and seek recognition. So you could say, I'd like to speak, or Mr. Chair, or something like that. So you could pretend I'm the presiding officer, and you could say Mr. Chair. That's what you'll hear a lot of Mr. Chair at the convention this year. Okay, as we go through this problem. Okay. So here's the problem we want to solve as a practice exercise. So a collegiate chapter proposes a way to increase Tau Beta Pi awareness on campus. And I think Florida, let's see, let me kind of go through what I'm proposing here. Okay, so let's pretend this motion is moved, okay? So let's say, I don't know, would anybody like to be recognized to move this? Just pretend you want to be the maker of the motion. So seek recognition first by saying, Mr. Chair, unmute your mic. And then the chair will recognize the member, and then you can move this motion. If somebody would like to do that. If not, I can do it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, since I don't know who spoke. Just state your chapter or your name, chapter, and why you wanted to be recognized.
Pennsylvania Iota. I'd like to make a motion. I like to move that Tau Beta Pi buys the FLA chapter a car with Tau Beta Pi and Florida Gator branding.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion. Is there a second? So in this case, you would just unmute and shout out your chapter and second. And I forgot to mention what a second actually means. So you've heard, people say second. It doesn't mean I agree with the motion, actually. Somebody can perfectly as well disagree with it, but feel like it's a motion that's good enough to be discussed. So even if you're opposed to it, you could second the motion. And then once you have two members to move and second the motion, that's when it is given to the entire meeting. So is there a second to this motion? Okay, Emma, thank you so much for coming. I know you have another meeting. You may have left already. I didn't see your message until just now, but I appreciate you taking the time. Okay. Is there a second?
Of the Vermont Alpha chapter seconds the motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's moved and seconded that Tau Beta Pi buys the Florida Alpha chapter a car with Tau Beta Pi and Florida Gator branding. Is there any debate? So then the chair would recognize the maker of the motion. It was who was that? Pennsylvania Iota, was that right? Would the member like to speak to their motion? So in this case, you would vote for, you would discuss why you made the motion, why it's a good idea, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So Mr. Chair, I made the motion so that we could increase the awareness of Tau Beta Pi, figuring that having the car on campus with the Tau Beta Pi and the Florida Gator branding on it, that people would then become aware and actually start discussions and potentially question and seek out members of Tau Beta Pi to understand actually what the organization does as a whole.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody that's opposed to the motion that would like to speak? Okay, so would anybody else like to debate? Is there any other discussion on this motion? Now you're free, also kind of just as a side note, you're free to ask a question relevant to this. Sometimes a question will come up, well, how much does this cost? Do we have enough money to do this? Or I've listed some examples of secondary motion, so you could ask the chair, well, I'm interested in doing one of these things mentioned below. How do I do that? So those are any sorts of things that you can seek recognition for to propose. So, kind of just as to move this, would anybody else like to speak to this? If not, we can kind of just go through the procedure and how it would be done informally if there isn't any other participation that wants to go on. So I'll give another opportunity. Would anybody else like to be recognized? Okay. All right, so since most of us are new, right? So a lot of us are beginners or have never done it before. A common thing that we might want to decide when we're kind of evaluating whether this is a good idea or not is it thorough enough? So one thing that comes to mind, well, maybe, I'm from another chapter. Maybe I don't like Florida Alpha. I like my chapter. So maybe I strike out. Here, let me kind of just put on scratch paper how this would work since we have time here. It's kind of just how the sausage is made here. So let's say we've got this motion here. Somebody wants to, I move, and here's the proper wording. So I move to amend the motion. I strike, and somebody shout out their chapter just so I can do it if somebody wants to do that. By striking Florida Alpha. Or we can just strike Florida Alpha. If I don't hear another chapter, we'll just strike Florida Alpha and talk about how that would work. No other chapters? Okay. So let's say, well, we just want to keep it tau beta pi and not necessarily have the gator thing. So let's say we want to amend the motion by striking Florida Alpha. So let's say this motion is made, seconded. So in that case, what we were thinking to do is amend the main motion. And so if striking, let me actually I'm just doing this on the fly here. Chapter. Let's start with that amendment first. Okay, so we want to strike those words precisely. So let's say, if it was adopted like that. I accidentally did. Let's kind of just do it. Let's say, okay, let's say that's what we're proposing. So if we adopt this amendment to strike the Florida Alpha chapter, then we would have the effect of that motion would be that tau beta pi buys a car with tau beta pi and Florida Gator branding. So then let's pretend that we debate that and that passes. So now our main motion as amended would be this, would be that, okay? And so now we're gonna buy a car with tau beta pi and Florida Gator branding. But now, well, maybe it doesn't make sense to have the Florida Gator branding. So we're going to amend that wording here, and we're going to move to amend the new main motion by striking and Florida Gator. So then striking the words. Let me know if this is confusing, if you want clarification. Do I see the speaking button? I don't know. Could you strike both phrases in the same motion? Yes, you could, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's do that right now. Let's start all over, because that is a good question. That's good. So to do that, if we would actually propose to strike out all of this, striking the words. Hopefully this makes sense. So we're kind of just constructing the motion systematically here. Inserting the words. Let's see. So we're going to insert the words. A car with tau beta branding. Okay, so the motion would look like that. So if we strike these words, these ones, and insert these words, and that's how we would get proposed new motion. look like this. So it would look like somebody buys a car with by branding. Okay, so yep. So that's how we would do it. So we'd strike the words and insert the words. Okay, buys a car. Okay, hopefully I did that correctly. So whenever the amendment is moved and seconded, so I assume there's a second, we would open up for debate. Let me double check something 1 second. Trying to get, okay, I got the participants open. Okay, so we would open up the debate, but we can only speak to why we're in favor or opposed to the amendment. Okay, so if the amendment is striking the words Florida Alpha chapter a car with blah, 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 and inserting these words, we're only going to speak to that amendment. Okay. All right, so we'll debate that. Let's say that vote passes. And so now this is our new main motion. Okay, so we would then go back to asking if there's debate on the main motion as amended. So then this would become the new motion. Okay, so then now we're going to debate this motion as amended. Okay, so other things you could do. Okay, let's say you don't like a car, let's say you want a truck. So you could strike out car and insert truck. Or, you want to specify the color. So you can insert the word, I don't know, blue in front of the word car. And so that could be an amendment. You could take this motion and refer it, you could appoint a committee to research this and debate it, that sort of thing. Maybe you want to specify a cost. So those are different things that we want to do as an organization to try to decide on an action that's best for the association. Does that make sense? Are there any questions on that? So if I go back to the slide, so these are different things. We can ask a question about cost or logistics, how long is this going to take or something like that, Are there any questions? That's basically how a motion works. And so hopefully that was helpful. If not, let me know what other questions you may have that would make it, that would clarify things better for you. If any questions. Okay. Okay, well, that's basically all I had. Or you have it? Let me see here. So there aren't any questions, I guess. Okay, so let me just kind of go through. I guess we can go through the handout just so you know what to expect. And if you have any questions on those handouts, definitely let me know. So let's start. So we have a little bit of time left. There are a lot of motions here, but basically the ones that you're going to be concerned about, this could be one. So if you're in the meeting and you can't hear who's on the microphone, or you can't see the PowerPoint that's on the screen, you can kind of raise this question of privilege and say that you can't see it. So it's related to comfort or noise, okay? Another one you might see is the previous question. You may move that if you felt like the debate has kind of gone on for too long and you think that the debate should end at that point. So you can move the previous question. So this requires a 2/3 vote, actually. As I mentioned before, there's a fundamental right to debate. And so you require more than just a simple majority to end the debate. You require actually 2/3. Okay, there may be some things where you may want to limit the debate to 10 minutes or 5 minutes, or extend it because it's going to take some extra time. You could do that. Amended, we talk about that. So it's important to, here's some phrasing for the proper wording for amending. And it's important that the amendments are germane, actually related to the actual motion. So in the example that we had, so in this case here, any amendments would have to be related to chapter or car or branding or that sort of thing. We're not going to insert something unrelated like, like buying a new building, a new engineering building for the chapter. That's not germane to this discussion. So that motion would be ruled out of order as an amendment. Okay. There's other things here. You'll see if there's a voice vote, it's close. Somebody may shout out division. That means retake the vote a different way. A common one is a request for information or point of information. So you can move that if you just really have a question that's related to the motion. That would help you make a decision as to if you're going to vote in favor or against. If you're not sure how parliamentary procedure works, you can move a parliamentary inquiry. And so you would ask, I want to do this. Is it possible? Or how would I do that? There's other things like point of order. If you know the rules and something doesn't seem right or that something wasn't done correctly. Okay, so those are most of them. And then the other ones talk about, okay, well, let's take the amendment, for example. Let me pull that up. So amend here. So in this row here, it's fairly lower ranking. The motion is not in order when another has the floor, meaning that you have to be recognized first to make that amendment. It does require a second and it is debatable. And actually you can amend an amendment. And to adopt an amendment, you require a majority. Reconsidered, we didn't talk about, but if at some point later on in the meeting or the next meeting, maybe more information came that would give you a good reason to reconsider that vote, you can move to reconsider. It doesn't come up very often, but sometimes it might. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so that's really the core of what Robert's Rules of Order is. Can you move to strike an amendment? As Katrina was asking. Yes and no. So let me give an example. Let's take the motion that we were talking about. My Word document here. Let's see. Oops. Let me pull it up since it's trying to find where it went. It's not popping up on my screen here. Okay. All right. So let's say we had strike an amendment. So the answer is yes and no. Let's say that you moved, I moved to amend, inserting type in front of. Okay, so let's say, let's kind of put an and. Let's do it like this. We're proposing this wording. Okay, here. So let's say that's the motion. This is the motion. Now, as a rule, you can't really strike the entire amendment unless you propose entirely new wording to replace it. So in this example, you have to strike and replace. So you can strike the entire thing and put something, instead of orange and blue, it could be green and purple at a cost not to exceed, $10,000. And that could be a proper amendment. Or let's say we have this motion here, we can strike, let's say we could strike and blue. So that could be another amendment on top of this one. So I move to strike the words. So if we strike and blue from this amendment, then we're just going to amend by inserting an orange. And so if that's passed, then it's buying an orange car with blah, blah, blah. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Does that answer the question? Okay, great. Okay, are there any other questions about amendments or other different types of motions? Okay, let's say this passes. Okay, so we debated this and we voted on it, or we discussed it back and forth, and we decided that's a good idea. So now that's adopted. So those colors are in. So we're not allowed to then strike this again. It's been decided that that's a good idea. So those colors are going to stay. If we want to add more colors, we'll have to insert more wording. An orange and blue and green, whatever. If you want to add a cost to this, so we could propose to add a cost greater than, I don't know if it's a used car or whatever, $10,000. So that could be an amendment. And so that could be another amendment. So let's say that amendment's on the floor. Something like that. So that amendment's in, but maybe you don't like 10,000, you like 12,000. So you could strike the words, you could strike. And that's another motion. Okay, so you debate, okay, 10,000 versus 12,000. That failed. So now you go back to, okay, so we're back to inserting at a cost no greater than 10,000. Is there any other discussion on that? We vote on that and we get this motion. Maybe that motion failed. So now we're back to this. And then we decide, okay, well, we want to refer that to a committee. Okay, so that you could do that. Or we can vote this down. It's not, maybe you want to decide this on a different day. So we just kill it or whatever. Okay, hopefully that answers the questions on how we want to solve this problem. Okay, is there anything else on that? Any questions on debate or motions or quorum or bylaws, anything like that? Any question at all? Any questions about conventions? So, the agenda or the meetings, how that works? No? Okay. Well, I'll stick around for a few more minutes, but that's an intro to Robert's Rules of Order. Hopefully it was helpful. Thank you. Thank you. There is, yes. So these handouts, I'll try to figure out who to give these to so that, oh, maybe I can attach them. Can I attach them to this meeting? Do we know if we have the right to do that? I'm not sure. Maybe only the host can do that. I don't know. But if not, we can come up with a link or an attachment to send the documents out. But I will hang out for a few more minutes in case another question comes up while you're thinking about it. We'll go through. And then if you have, let me pull this. And definitely feel free to, scan this code and do the evaluation. If there was anything that was missing or that was helpful or that could be improved upon, so that whoever does this presentation for the next EF session would have those comments and feedback available to them to make this better for everybody. Oh, and here's my contact information. So let me kind of put that in the chat. If you have any questions or want to text or give me a call, feel free to do that. So let's take that to here. And if you want to fill out the link. That's how you would do that. And then just use my first and last initial. That's how they wanted us to fill in this here. If you want to give feedback, it's optional, of course. But I definitely appreciate you taking the time this evening to see how Robert's Rules of Order works. Any types of, but I'm here if you want to talk about a specific motion in detail, we can do that. Great. Okay, well, you all have a great evening. And thank you again.